Become best friends with your inner critic, transform self-doubt into self-compassion, and turn your harshest critic into your greatest ally. Introduction. Welcome to your journey of self-discovery and self-compassion. If you're reading this, there's a good chance you already know the voice of your inner critic. It's that relentless commentator in your mind, the one that always has something to say about your decisions, your progress, and even your appearance. It's the one that says, "You're not good enough. You should be further along by now," or "What will people think?" Sound familiar? Most people spend years trying to fight, silence, or drown out their inner critic. But here's a radical idea. What if, instead of battling it, you befriended it? What if, instead of treating it as an enemy, you treated it as a misunderstood part of yourself that's just trying, albeit clumsily, to keep you safe? That's exactly what this book is here to help you do. Why befriend your inner critic instead of fighting it? Let's clear up a big misconception right away. Your inner critic is not your enemy. It might feel like one, especially when it's being harsh, judgmental, and unforgiving, but its true goal is to protect you from pain, failure, and rejection. The problem? It's using outdated strategies to do it. Think of it like an overprotective parent or a friend who's bad at giving advice. It means well, but it doesn't know well. Instead of offering wisdom and support, it leans on fear, shame, and criticism to motivate you. But here's the thing, you can teach it a new way. By shifting your relationship with your inner critic, you'll notice powerful changes in your life. Increased confidence, no more doubting yourself at every turn. Resilience in the face of failure. Mistakes won't feel like the end of the world anymore. Inner peace and self-compassion. Imagine no longer being at war with your own mind. This isn't about silencing the inner critic. It's about listening to it, understanding its fears, and showing it a better way to communicate with you. How this book will support you. This book isn't just theory. It's a hands-on, step-by-step guide to transforming your relationship with your inner critic. Through practical exercises, case studies, and actionable techniques, you'll learn to recognize the voice of your inner critic, reframe its messages, and create lasting change. Here's what you can expect in each part of this journey. Part 1. Becoming best friends with your inner critic. This first part sets the foundation. You'll learn where your inner critic comes from, why it's so persistent, and how to shift from fighting it to befriending it. Chapter 1. Meet your inner critic. A new perspective. Discover the surprising role of your inner critic as a protector, and learn why it sounds so harsh. You'll also meet the 5 common inner critic personas, like the perfectionist, the guilt tripper, and the doubter, and figure out which ones show up for you. Chapter 2. Detach from the voice. You are not your critic. Learn to separate your authentic voice from the voice of your inner critic. Through simple exercises, you'll see how to identify, name, and detach from the critic's commentary. Chapter 3. The 4-step clarity process. Tired of self-doubt and overthinking? This 4-step process, pause, test for truth, reframe, and choose a new perspective, will help you challenge and shift your most negative thoughts. Chapter 4. Dialogue with your inner critic. Transform conflict into connection. Yes, you can talk to your inner critic, and it will listen. You'll learn how to engage in a compassionate dialogue with your inner critic, ask it better questions, and create a new partnership. Chapter 5. Deconstructing shame and self-judgment. Shame is the gasoline that fuels your inner critic. This chapter helps you dismantle shame-based thinking and approach your perceived failures with compassion and grace. Chapter 6. Master the art of self-compassion. Self-compassion isn't just being nice to yourself. It's a science-backed strategy for reducing self-criticism. You'll learn how to practice self-kindness, recognize common humanity, and stay grounded in mindfulness. Chapter 7. Reprogramming the voice. New habits for lasting change. Your inner critic's voice has been on repeat for years, but it's not unchangeable. Thanks to neuroplasticity, you can rewire your brain to think differently. This chapter gives you tools to reframe beliefs, visualize success, and create new mental habits. Chapter 8. Nurturing the protector within. If your inner critic is a protector, you can learn to reparent it with love and patience. You'll create a safe space in your mind where it can rest and recharge instead of being on high alert all the time. Chapter 9. Quieting the inner critic in specific situations. Your inner critic's voice is loudest in certain moments, like before a big presentation, after a mistake, or when comparing yourself to others. This chapter shows you how to handle those triggers with calm and clarity. Chapter 10. BFF with your inner critic. The BFF method, befriend, frame, forgive, is a simple, repeatable 3-step process to transform your inner critic from a bully into a best friend. This chapter walks you through how to make it a daily practice. Chapter 11. Your new best friend. Living with peace and power. What happens when you've truly befriended your inner critic? You experience peace, self-trust, and an unshakable sense of inner strength. This chapter shows you what's possible and how to sustain it. Part 2. The inner critic in different perspectives. Now that you've built a foundation, you'll learn how to deal with your inner critic in specific life situations, where it tends to show up the most. Chapter 12. The inner critic at work. Overcoming imposter syndrome and perfectionism. Work is prime real estate for the inner critic. You'll learn how to handle fears of failure, perfectionism, and self-doubt in professional settings. Chapter 13. The inner critic in relationships. Overcoming self-doubt and fear of rejection. The inner critic often shows up in relationships as a fear of being too much or not enough. You'll learn to navigate these fears with compassion. Chapter 14. The inner critic and anxiety. How to break the anxiety critic cycle. Anxiety and the inner critic fuel each other. This chapter breaks the cycle with tools for calm, clarity, and peace. Chapter 15. The inner critic and body image. Quieting self-judgment about appearance. Body image is a playground for the critic's harshest commentary. You'll learn to shift from self-loathing to body neutrality and reclaim peace with your appearance. Chapter 16. The inner critic and procrastination. Stop self-sabotage. Procrastination is the inner critic's way of keeping you safe from failure. This chapter shows you how to recognize and shift that pattern. Chapter 17. The inner critic as a parent. From not good enough to good enough. Parenthood is one of the most emotionally vulnerable roles we have. This chapter teaches you how to quiet your perfect parent critic and embrace being good enough. Chapter 18. The inner critic and health goals. Overcoming self-sabotage. Weight loss, fitness, and health goals often awaken the inner critic. This chapter shows you how to stay consistent with your goals, even after setbacks. Part 3. Workbook. This section turns theory into action. You'll get journaling prompts, daily reflection exercises, and a 30-day guided plan to shift your inner critic from bully to bestie. How to get the most out of this book. This is a hands-on experience. Don't just read the exercises. Do them. Take your time, be patient, and be kind to yourself. The goal isn't perfection. Remember Chapter 6? It's progress. Each chapter builds on the last, and every small shift you make adds up. If your inner critic shows up while reading this book, telling you that you're doing it wrong, or you're behind, smile, nod, and say, "Thanks for your input, but I'm doing just fine." Let's get started. You've got this. Part 1. Becoming best friends with your inner critic. Welcome to Part 1. The foundation of your journey to understanding, transforming, and ultimately befriending your inner critic. This part is all about getting to know that persistent, sometimes annoying, but surprisingly well-intentioned voice in your head. Most of us think the critic is our enemy, the nagging voice that tells us we're not good enough, smart enough, or fast enough. But here's a twist. What if it's not here to hurt you, but to protect you? What if, instead of fighting it, you learn to work with it? In these chapters, you'll learn where the inner critic comes from, how to recognize its different personalities, and how to shift your relationship from adversary to ally. We'll introduce you to practical techniques for detaching from the voice, challenging its stories, and even having conversations with it. Yes, actual conversations. By the end of Part 1, you'll have a whole new perspective on your inner critic. It won't seem so scary or overpowering anymore. In fact, it might just become one of your greatest sources of strength. Let's dive in. Your new best friend is waiting to meet you. Chapter 1. Meet your inner critic. A new perspective. What is the role of your inner critic? Your inner critic might seem like a ruthless villain, but here's a surprising twist. It's actually here to protect you. Sounds wild, right? But think about it. Its job is to keep you safe from rejection, embarrassment, and failure. The problem is, it's using a playbook from a different era. It's like having a bodyguard who's stuck in the past, convinced that every mistake could cost you your life. Its heart is in the right place, but its methods are outdated. Why the inner critic sounds harsh, but is rooted in fear and protection. The inner critic's go-to strategy is fear-based motivation. If it can scare you enough, maybe you'll stay in line and avoid danger, like failure or embarrassment. That's why it's so loud and so mean sometimes. It's like an overprotective parent who's worried you're about to do something risky. Don't do that, it yells. What if you mess up? It's not trying to ruin your life. It's trying to keep you safe. But here's the good news. Once you see it for what it is, you can learn to work with it, not against it. Types of inner critic personalities. Not all inner critics are the same. They've got different styles of criticism, and you've probably met a few of these characters before. Here are some of the most common personas your inner critic might take on. The perfectionist. This one's all about high standards. It's the voice that says, not good enough. Do it again. The perfectionist has impossibly high expectations and loves to remind you that you're falling short. It's exhausting, but guess what? It's also trying to protect you from embarrassment or failure by making sure you're perfect before you step out into the world. The guilt tripper. Ever feel like you're carrying around a suitcase full of should-haves? That's the guilt tripper at work. It's the voice that says, you should have called them back, or you're not doing enough for your family. This critic feeds on past mistakes and loves to keep you stuck in if only mode. It's trying to keep you moral, responsible, and considerate, but it's often overdoing it. The pessimist. This one's a doozy. It's the voice of doom and gloom, constantly warning you of worst-case scenarios. What if it all goes wrong? This will never work. The pessimist wants you to stay in your comfort zone and avoid taking risks. Its protection strategy is, don't try, and you'll never fail. Sounds safe, but it's also incredibly limiting. The overachiever. This critic's mantra is, more, more, more. It's the part of you that never lets you rest because there's always one more thing to achieve, one more goal to hit. While it's great for motivation, it's also draining. The overachiever wants to protect you from being average or ordinary. But in its attempt to push you to the top, it forgets that rest and joy matter too. The not enough voice. This one's sneaky. It's that subtle whisper in the back of your mind that says, you're not smart enough, attractive enough, experienced enough. Insert anything here. Enough. It's the ultimate seed of self-doubt. The not enough voice believes that if it keeps reminding you of your flaws, you'll strive to be better. Spoiler alert, it's a trap. You're already enough. Self-reflection exercise. Identify your unique inner critic. Here's where things get interesting. If you're going to befriend your inner critic, you need to know who you're dealing with. Is it the perfectionist? The pessimist? Maybe it's a mix of a few of them. Here's how you can get to know it better. Visualize your inner critic. Close your eyes and imagine your inner critic as a person, creature, or character. What does it look like? Is it big or small? Is it loud or quiet? Does it have a specific outfit, color, or shape? Get as detailed as you can. If you're more of a visual person, you might even draw it. Give it a name. Naming your inner critic creates a bit of emotional distance. When you're able to say, oh, that's just name talking again, it's easier to separate yourself from its voice. It's not you. It's just one part of you. Some people name it the judge, the critic, or something funny like Maggie Nancy. Whatever works for you. Notice its go-to phrases. Take a moment to reflect. What are the top 3 things your inner critic loves to say? Write them down. Is it, you're so lazy, or you'll never get this right? These are like the greatest hits of your inner critic's playlist. The more aware you are of these tracks, the faster you'll be able to recognize when they're playing. Journal about your critic's personality. Take a few minutes to write freely about your inner critic. Answer these prompts. What does it sound like? A strict parent, a grumpy coach, an anxious friend? When does it usually show up? When you're starting something new? When you're tired? What's its favorite topic to criticize you about? Work, relationships, appearance. This exercise might seem simple, but it's a game changer. The more you get to know your inner critic, the easier it becomes to spot it in the moment. And once you can spot it, you can pause, take a breath, and choose how to respond instead of just reacting. Chapter 2. Detach from the voice. You are not your critic. Where does the voice come from? Let's get one thing clear. You are not your inner critic. It feels like it's you because it's been living in your head rent-free for so long. But here's the truth. That voice isn't you. It's just a collection of old stories, fears, and protective instincts that have been running on autopilot. So, where did this voice come from? Early childhood. Kids are like little sponges, absorbing everything around them. If you grew up with harsh criticism, high expectations, or conditional love, that's where the inner critic got its script. It's trying to protect you by making sure you're good enough to avoid rejection. Societal expectations. Messages from media, social norms, and cultural ideals have a sneaky way of embedding shoulds into your mind. Be thinner, be more successful, be more productive. The critic picks up these expectations and turns them into rules for how you're supposed to live. Cultural influences. Every culture has unspoken rules about what's acceptable and good. These rules influence how your inner critic speaks to you. For example, if you grew up in a hard work above all culture, your critic might push you to do more, even when you're exhausted. But here's the key. That voice is not your voice. You're about to learn how to separate the two. The difference between your voice and the voice of the critic. Your voice is calm, kind, and rooted in self-compassion. It's the voice that says, "You're doing your best," or "It's okay to rest today." It's not loud or pushy. It's steady, clear, and wise. The critic's voice is anxious, harsh, and often repetitive. It's the one that says, "You're messing this up," or "You'll never be good enough." It's reactive, not reflective. It's based on fear, not truth. Once you can tell the difference between your voice and the critic's voice, you're one step closer to detaching from it. Techniques to create emotional distance from the inner critic. Here's where it gets practical. You're going to learn how to step back from the critic's voice and see it for what it is, just a voice. It's not you. It's not truth. It's just a story. 1. The observer's seat. This is a mindfulness-based approach that helps you watch your thoughts without reacting to them. Imagine you're sitting in a movie theater, watching a film of your thoughts. You're not in the movie. You're the observer. How it works. Close your eyes for a moment and notice your thoughts. Instead of being the thought, pretend you're sitting in a chair, watching the thought appear on a movie screen. Label the thought, "Oh, that's the not good enough thought again." Don't argue with it. Don't fight it. Just watch it come and go. Why it works. The moment you're watching the critic's thoughts instead of being them, you've created separation. You're no longer in the story. You're observing it. 2. The mirror exercise. This technique helps you see the critic's voice as a reflection of old stories, not reality. How it works. Stand in front of a mirror and look at your reflection. Imagine that your critic's voice is coming from the reflection, not from inside your mind. Speak back to it as if it's a person outside of you. Example. If it's saying, "You're not doing enough," you can respond, "That's an interesting opinion, but I'm doing my best right now." Why it works. When you see the critic as something outside of you, it's easier to separate from it. You're less likely to believe it's the truth. 3. Breath of awareness. This technique grounds you in the present moment. When you're present, you're less likely to get caught up in mental chatter. How it works. Breathe in for 4 seconds, hold for 4 seconds, and exhale for 6 seconds. As you breathe, say, "I'm here now. I'm safe right now." Each time the critic's voice shows up, use your breath as an anchor to return to the present moment. Why it works. The critic's voice is usually focused on the past, regrets, or the future, what ifs. Breathwork anchors you in the present, where the critic has no power. Practical exercise. Listening as a witness. This exercise will teach you how to witness your inner critic's voice without reacting to it. It's like watching a storm from inside a cozy cabin. Here's how to do it. Close your eyes and take 3 deep breaths. Notice the thoughts in your mind. Don't push them away. Just listen. Ask, what's my inner critic saying right now? Write down the critic's words. Don't edit them. Just get them on paper. Read them back to yourself. Ask, is this my voice, or is this the voice of my critic? Step 2. Practice responding with neutrality. Look at the list of critical thoughts. Respond to each one like a calm, wise friend would. Example, if the critic says, "You're not doing enough," respond with, "I'm doing the best I can with what I have." What's next? The critic's voice might never fully disappear, but it will get quieter. The moment you realize, "I'm not my critic," you're free. Start with one technique. Try the observer's seat or the mirror exercise this week. Don't aim for perfection. Aim for progress. Each time you witness the voice, label it and detach from it. You're reclaiming your power. You're not the voice in your head. You're the one who's listening. Chapter 3. The 4-step clarity process: how to challenge negative thoughts in 4 simple steps. If your inner critic's voice feels like a nonstop negative commentary, it's time to challenge it. Not by arguing with it, that's exhausting, but by getting clear on what's true and what's not. This is where the 4-step clarity process comes in. Think of it like hitting pause on a chaotic movie and deciding which parts of the story are actually worth believing. Let's break it down. Step 1. Pause and name the thought. First things first. Stop and listen. Most of the time, we're so caught up in our day that we're barely aware of the thoughts running the show. But when you're feeling stuck, anxious, or like you're not good enough, pause and ask yourself, what is this voice actually saying? Can I write it down as one clear statement? For example, instead of, "I'm terrible at this," you might write, "I'll never figure out this project." Pin it down. Make it clear. This way, you're not fighting a vague feeling. You're working with an actual thought you can challenge. Step 2. Test for truth. Here's where things get interesting. Once you've named the thought, ask yourself, is this absolutely true? How do I know it's true? If you're being honest, you'll notice that most of your critical thoughts don't hold up under this kind of scrutiny. Maybe you're telling yourself, "I'll never figure this out." But is that absolutely true? Probably not. There's a big difference between never and right now I'm struggling with it. See the shift? It's subtle, but it's powerful. You're no longer dealing with a global, unchangeable truth. You're dealing with a moment in time. Step 3. Reframe the thought. Here's where you're going to flip the script. Take the original thought and turn it into something more useful. You've got a few options here. Turn it into its opposite. If the thought is, "I'll never figure this out," you flip it to, "I'm learning how to figure this out." Find a neutral version. If "I'm a terrible leader" feels too heavy to flip completely, you might shift it to, "I'm a leader who's still learning." This isn't about forcing positive thinking. It's about being more real with yourself. You're not sugarcoating it. You're being honest in a way that's actually helpful. Step 4. Choose a new perspective. The final step is to step back and see the bigger picture. This is where growth happens. Ask yourself, what's a more helpful way to see this situation? If I approach this with a growth mindset, what would I believe? Here's the magic. When you're able to see your struggle as part of the process, and not as some final verdict on your worth, you'll be able to move forward. Instead of being stuck, you're growing. Instead of, "I'm failing," it's, "I'm learning something new." This shift in perspective turns struggle into momentum. Case study. A real-life example of overcoming a self-limiting thought. Meet Sarah. She's a designer working on a big client project, and the deadline's looming. Her inner critic is saying, "You're so behind. You're going to blow this." Here's how she applied the 4-step clarity process. Pause and name the thought. "I'm going to blow this." Test for truth. Is it absolutely true? No. She's behind schedule. But she's also made big progress. The deadline isn't today. Reframe the thought. "I'm making progress, and I still have time to prioritize what matters most." Choose a new perspective. She sees the project as a learning opportunity instead of a pass-fail test. She reminds herself that it's okay to ask for help if she needs it. This shift helps Sarah feel capable instead of paralyzed. And guess what? Her progress speeds up because she's no longer wasting mental energy on self-doubt. Exercise. Rewrite one of your inner critic's harshest beliefs. Now it's your turn. Think of one self-critical belief that's been holding you back. Write it down and walk it through the 4-step clarity process. Pause and name the thought. What's the exact thought your inner critic is saying? Test for truth. Is this thought 100% true? With no exceptions. Reframe the thought. How could you flip it into its opposite or a neutral version? Choose a new perspective. What's a new, growth-oriented perspective you can hold instead? Take a few minutes to work through it. Don't rush. Write it down. If one thought feels too big, start with a smaller one. These small wins add up. This chapter has given you a simple but powerful process to challenge negative thoughts. You're not at the mercy of your inner critic's voice. You've got tools to challenge it, change it, and shift your perspective. Use the 4-step clarity process whenever you feel stuck, and you'll be amazed at how much more peaceful and powerful your mind becomes. Chapter 4. Dialogue with your inner critic. Transform conflict into connection. What does it mean to talk to your inner critic? If the idea of talking to your inner critic sounds strange, you're not alone. Most of us think of the inner critic as something to ignore, silence, or fight. But here's the truth. Your inner critic is just one part of you. It's not all of you. And like any part of you, it's there for a reason. Instead of seeing it as an enemy, what if you approached it like a misunderstood friend? Yes, even if it's a friend who's being a total pain. When you give this voice a chance to be heard, something incredible happens. The conflict shifts into connection. You're no longer battling yourself. You're having a conversation, and that's a game changer. The power of giving it a voice, personification. Here's a trick that's surprisingly effective. Personify your inner critic. That means imagining it as a character with its own personality, voice, and vibe. Is it a cranky old coach yelling from the sidelines? A worried parent who's always looking out for you? Maybe it's a sassy, overly dramatic roommate who's had too much coffee. When you personify your inner critic, you create some emotional distance. It's no longer this ominous force in your mind. It's just a part of you, and that part has a name, a voice, and maybe even a sense of humor. How to engage in a healthy dialogue with your inner critic. So how do you start a conversation with your inner critic? It's simpler than you think. You don't need to believe in the process for it to work. Just try it. The goal isn't to win, it's to understand. The 3-step voice dialogue process. Identify the critic's voice and separate it from your core self. Start by recognizing when your inner critic is talking. Is it that voice saying, "You're not doing enough," or "Why did you say that? You sound so stupid"? Yep, that's it. Pause for a second and imagine that voice as its own character. You're not merging with it. You're listening to it as an observer. This step alone creates a powerful shift. Ask compassionate questions. This part is crucial. Instead of yelling back or telling it to shut up, get curious. Ask it things like, "What do you want from me right now? What are you afraid will happen if I don't listen to you? How long have you been trying to protect me like this?" When you approach the conversation with curiosity, instead of defensiveness, the critic's tone often shifts. Suddenly, it's not attacking you, it's sharing its fears and concerns. Negotiate a partnership. This might sound wild, but you're going to ask your inner critic how you can work together. Yes, together. Ask it questions like, "What's a more helpful way we can do this? Can we agree to check in at certain times instead of you popping in 24/7? What's one thing I could do to help you feel less worried?" The goal is to turn the inner critic into a partner, not an adversary. It's been trying to help you all along. It just hasn't had the right strategy. But once it knows you're open to working together, it's much more likely to chill out. Exercise. Write a letter to your inner critic. Time to put this into practice. This exercise may feel a little unusual, but trust me, it's powerful. Here's how it works. Write a compassionate letter to your inner critic. Get a notebook or open a document on your computer. Start by addressing your critic directly. You might say something like, "Dear inner critic," or "Dear overprotective coach in my head." Tell it you're open to listening. Let it know you're curious about what it's afraid of. Reassure it that you're capable of handling things and you're open to working together. Let your inner critic respond in writing. This part might feel weird at first, but go with it. Write a response from your inner critic. Yes, you're writing both sides of the dialogue. This part is pure gold because it often reveals fears you didn't realize you had. Your inner critic might say something like, "I'm afraid you're going to fail if I'm not tough on you. I'm worried you'll be rejected if you're not perfect." Let it say whatever it needs to say. Don't edit. Don't fix it. Just write it all down. Reflect on the dialogue when you're done. Read both sides of the conversation. What stands out? Did you learn anything new about your critic's motives? Do you see where it's coming from? Hint, it's almost always rooted in protection, not punishment. What's next? By engaging in dialogue with your inner critic, you're doing something most people never do. You're building a relationship with it. It's not about defeating it. It's about understanding it. And from that place of understanding, you'll find it's a lot less scary, a lot less harsh, and, believe it or not, a lot more helpful. Take it one step at a time. Start with a short conversation. Write that letter. You'll be amazed at how much peace and power you can create just by getting to know this misunderstood part of yourself. Chapter 5. Deconstructing Shame and Self-Judgment. How shame and judgment fuel the critic's voice. Ever notice how your inner critic's voice gets loudest right after you've messed up? It's like it's been waiting for you to slip so it can swoop in with a megaphone and a highlight reel of everything you've ever done wrong. That's not random. Shame and self-judgment are like gasoline for your inner critic. The moment you're feeling vulnerable, embarrassed, or less than, that critical voice goes into overdrive. Why? Because it's trying to help you avoid feeling shame. The logic, flawed, but still, is that if it criticizes you first, you'll be prepared when the world does it. It's a protection mechanism, but one that's gone rogue. Why the critic is most active during moments of failure or embarrassment. Think back to a moment when you felt embarrassed or failed at something. Did your inner critic stay quiet? Probably not. It's usually loudest at these moments. Here's why. Fear of rejection. Failure can trigger fears about being rejected or found out as inadequate. Your critic steps in, thinking it's being helpful by preemptively calling you out. Perfectionism. If you've ever believed, if I'm perfect, I'll be safe, then your inner critic sees failure as a threat to your safety. It's trying to whip you into shape to avoid this pain in the future. The irony, the harsher it is, the more paralyzed you feel. Shame doesn't motivate, it shuts you down. The hidden roots of shame, cultural, family, and social factors. Shame isn't something you're born with. It's something you've learned. We're taught early on what's acceptable and not acceptable in our families, cultures, and social circles. Maybe you grew up in a home where success was everything and mistakes weren't allowed. Or maybe your school experience taught you that being different was dangerous. These moments leave marks. Shame has roots in family conditioning. Did you get praised only for being the smart one or the responsible one? If so, you probably learned that your worth is tied to performance. Cultural expectations. Many of us grow up absorbing cultural messages about who we're supposed to be: successful, thin, strong, self-sufficient. When we don't fit the mold, shame creeps in. Social comparison? Social media, anyone? Seeing other people's perfect lives 24/7 can make you feel like you're the only one who's struggling. Spoiler alert, you're not. Techniques to overcome shame and self-judgment. Okay, so now that we've unmasked the roots of shame, let's talk about how to deal with it. Here's what's worked for others, and will probably work for you too. 1. The common humanity practice. When you're feeling shame, it's easy to believe you're the only one struggling. The truth, everyone's struggling. You're not alone. You're part of a very big and very human club. Reminding yourself of this fact breaks shame's power. Try this. When you're caught in self-judgment, say to yourself, everyone feels this way sometimes. This is part of being human. Why it works. Shame thrives in isolation. The moment you realize you're not alone, it's like turning on a light in a dark room. 2. Compassionate self-talk. If your best friend came to you and said, "I'm such a failure. I'll never get it right," would you respond with, "Yep, you're a total disaster"? No way. But that's what we do to ourselves all the time. It's time to flip the script. Try this. The next time you're in a shame spiral, ask, if my best friend were feeling this way, what would I say to them? Then say that to yourself. Why it works. Self-compassion isn't fluff. It's strategy. Research shows that self-compassionate people are more resilient and less likely to give up. 3. The unmasking exercise. Beneath every shameful moment, there's usually a hidden belief. It's often something like, if I'm not perfect, I'm not lovable. Or, if I fail, I'm a failure. The problem isn't the mistake, it's the belief. This exercise will help you unmask it. Try this. The next time you're feeling shame, ask yourself, what belief is hiding underneath this feeling? Is this belief 100% true? How would I feel if I didn't believe this? Why it works. Most beliefs fueling shame aren't actually true. They're old scripts you've been carrying around. When you see them clearly, you're free to let them go. Exercise. Self-compassion journal. This exercise is simple but powerful. It's designed to help you build the habit of treating yourself with kindness instead of judgment. Here's how it works. Get a notebook or open a notes app. Write down one self-critical thought that's been bothering you, e.g., I'm not good enough at my job. Respond to that thought with self-compassion. What would you say to a friend who's feeling this way? Write down one reminder of common humanity. Everyone feels this way sometimes. End with a compassionate reframe. I'm learning and growing every day. Do this every day for a week, and you'll notice a shift. You'll see your inner critic's voice for what it is, a worried part of you, not the whole of you. What's next? Shame and self-judgment are sneaky, but they're not invincible. The more you name them, challenge them, and offer yourself compassion, the less power they'll have. You're not broken, you're human. And the fact that you're reading this chapter means you're ready to make a change. That's something to be proud of. Chapter 6. Master the art of self-compassion. Why self-compassion is more powerful than self-esteem. If you've been chasing self-esteem, you're not alone. For years, we've been told that feeling good about yourself is the ultimate goal. But here's the catch. Self-esteem is often tied to achievements, comparisons, and being the best. It's fragile. One bad day or a single mistake, and poof, there goes your self-esteem. Self-compassion, on the other hand, isn't based on how well you're doing. It's unconditional. It's the love and support you give yourself just because you're human. When you practice self-compassion, you're not chasing perfection. You're treating yourself with kindness, even when things aren't going perfectly. And that's where real growth happens. 3 essential elements of self-compassion. So what's self-compassion made of? It's not some fluffy idea. It's a practice with real, tangible parts. Here are the big 3 that make it work. Self-kindness. Self-kindness is about replacing self-criticism with encouragement. Imagine you're talking to a friend who's struggling. Would you say, "You're such a failure"? Of course not. So why do we say it to ourselves? Self-kindness means offering yourself words of comfort and support instead of harsh judgment. It's saying, "This is tough, but I'm doing my best," instead of, "I'm such a mess." It's being on your own side. Common humanity. Here's the thing about pain, failure, and struggle. Everyone experiences it. But when you're in the middle of it, it's easy to think you're the only one. No one else feels like this, you'll tell yourself. Spoiler alert, they do. Common humanity is about remembering that you're part of a much bigger human experience. Everyone faces setbacks. Everyone doubts themselves. You're not broken, you're human. And being human comes with a full range of emotions, mistakes, and messy moments. Mindful awareness. This part is about being present with your feelings without getting swallowed by them. When tough emotions hit, we're often tempted to push them away or numb them with distractions. But suppressing emotions just makes them louder later on. Mindful awareness means noticing what's happening inside you. The sadness, frustration, fear, and allowing it to be there without judgment. It's like saying, "Oh, look, here's anxiety again. I see you." This simple act of acknowledgement reduces the intensity of the feeling. You don't have to fight it. You just have to notice it. Practical techniques to build self-compassion. If self-compassion sounds nice, but you're wondering how to actually do it, don't worry. Here are a few techniques to get you started. 1. The compassion break. Think of this as a mini meditation you can do anywhere, anytime. When you're feeling overwhelmed or self-critical, try this 3-step process. Pause and take a deep breath. Yes, right now, acknowledge the pain. Say to yourself, "This is a moment of struggle. It's hard right now." Offer yourself kindness. Place a hand on your heart or give yourself a small gesture of care, like holding your own hand, and say something like, "I'm doing the best I can, and that's enough." This whole process takes 30 seconds, but it's powerful. It's a reminder that you can be your own source of comfort. 2. Self-soothing practices. When you're feeling anxious, overwhelmed, or just plain off, self-soothing techniques can help bring you back to center. Here's what you can try. Physical touch. Place a hand on your chest, give yourself a hug, or gently rub your arms. Your body responds to warmth and gentle pressure like it's receiving care from another person. Kind words. Use soothing language with yourself. Say, "I'm here for you," or "It's okay to feel this way." It's amazing how much this simple practice can calm your nervous system. Calming breaths. Take 5 slow, deep breaths in through your nose and out through your mouth. Breathe like you're filling up a balloon slowly and releasing it just as slowly. Exercise. Create a self-compassion mantra. A mantra is a short, powerful phrase that you can repeat when you're feeling down. It's like having a go-to reminder to shift your mindset. Your inner critic might have been feeding you negative mantras like, "I'm not good enough," or "I'll never figure this out." Time to flip that script. Here's how to create your self-compassion mantra. Think of a phrase that makes you feel supported. Here are some ideas. I'm learning and growing every day. I'm doing the best I can, and that's enough. I'm human, and it's okay to be human. This moment is tough, but I am tougher. Write it down and put it somewhere visible. Your phone lock screen, sticky notes, journal, wherever you'll see it. The next time your inner critic shows up, take a deep breath and repeat your mantra. Say it like you mean it. The more you do this, the more it becomes your default response to self-doubt. What's next? Mastering self-compassion takes practice, but it's worth it. Unlike self-esteem, it doesn't vanish the moment you're struggling. It's always there for you, ready to offer comfort and support. Start small. Use the compassion break when you're feeling stressed. Write a mantra you can lean on when you're feeling down. Practice these skills every day, and you'll notice a shift in how you talk to yourself. Here's a little reminder for the road. You deserve the same kindness you offer everyone else. Chapter 7. Reprogramming the voice. New habits for lasting change. The science of rewiring your brain. Here's some good news. You're not stuck with the voice of your inner critic as it is. Your brain isn't a fixed, unchangeable machine. It's more like a garden that can be pruned, reshaped, and replanted with new seeds of thought. The science behind this? Neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity is a fancy way of saying your brain can create new neural pathways, new ways of thinking, responding, and feeling. When you repeat a thought, that pathway gets stronger. Think of it like a dirt path through a forest. Walk it enough times, and it becomes a clear, easy-to-travel trail. The same thing happens in your brain. And yes, this works for positive thoughts too. Why repetition and visualization are essential for change. If you're thinking, okay, but how do I actually change these thoughts? You're not alone. This is where repetition and visualization come in. Repetition strengthens new neural pathways. Every time you practice a new thought, it's like laying down one more stone on that new path. Visualization helps too. When you vividly imagine something, your brain lights up as if it's actually happening. That's why athletes visualize success before big games. And it's why you can use the same strategy to reprogram your inner critic. Techniques for reprogramming the inner critic. These techniques aren't complicated, but they are powerful. If you're consistent with them, you'll see big changes in how your inner critic shows up and how it's received. 1. Morning affirmations. How you start your day matters. If your first thought is, I'm already behind, that's the tone you're setting for the day. But if your first thought is, I'm capable of handling whatever comes my way today, you're off to a much stronger start. Here's how to do it. Write down 3 affirmations that support the way you want to feel. Example, I am worthy as I am. I can figure things out as they come. Or, today, I'm focusing on progress, not perfection. Say them out loud in the morning. Do it while brushing your teeth, in the shower, or right before you check your phone. Bonus tip. Write them on sticky notes and put them where you'll see them, your bathroom mirror, fridge, or phone wallpaper. 2. The power of visualization. If you're tired of your inner critic's greatest hits playlist of past failures, it's time to change the station. Visualization is one way to do it. When you imagine yourself succeeding, your brain responds as if it's real. This primes you to believe in your ability to succeed, which quiets the inner critic's doubt. Here's how to do it. Close your eyes and picture yourself succeeding at something specific. If you've got a big meeting or presentation coming up, imagine it going exactly how you'd want it to go. See it, feel it, hear it. Don't just picture the big win. Visualize the process too. See yourself feeling calm as you prepare. Notice how you're handling it with ease. Do this for 3 to 5 minutes each day. Make it part of your morning routine or do it right before bed. 3. Daily reframes. This is a game changer. Your inner critic is a master at spotting problems, but you're going to teach it how to spot opportunities instead. When something goes wrong, your inner critic's first reaction might be, "See, you're a failure." But with a reframe, you'll respond with, "This is a chance to learn and grow." Here's how to do it. When you're faced with a challenge or mistake, pause. Seriously, just pause. Ask yourself, how can I reframe this into an opportunity for growth? Example, if you're late for a meeting, instead of thinking, "I'm so irresponsible," reframe it to, "I'm learning to manage my time better." Exercise. Write a personal reframe for 3 major life areas. Time to get personal. We're going to reframe limiting beliefs in 3 major areas of your life: personal life, career, and relationships. This exercise will help you spot the negative beliefs you've been holding on to and swap them for something more helpful. Here's how to do it. Identify a limiting belief. Personal life. What's one belief about yourself that's been holding you back? Example, "I'll never be in shape." Career. What's one belief about your career that's keeping you stuck? Example, "I'm not experienced enough to apply for that job." Relationships. What's one belief about relationships that's limiting you? Example, "People always leave me." Reframe it. Personal life. "I'm capable of building healthy habits, one small step at a time." Career. Every expert started as a beginner. "I'm learning and growing every day." Relationships. "I'm worthy of love, and the right people will stay." Write it down. Write your new reframes on paper, in your phone's notes app, or anywhere you'll see them often. What's next? Reprogramming your inner critic's voice isn't a one-and-done process. It's a daily practice. Every time you practice affirmations, visualization, and reframes, you're strengthening new neural pathways. It's like going to the mental gym. Small, daily reps add up to big changes over time. If it feels hard at first, that's normal. Remember, you're not fighting your inner critic. You're showing it a new way to think, feel, and respond. Stick with it. Each reframe, each visualization, and each kind word you offer yourself is one more step toward lasting change. You're already doing the work. Keep going. Chapter 8. Nurturing the protector within. Understanding the protective role of your inner critic. Here's a wild idea. Your inner critic doesn't hate you. In fact, it's trying to protect you. Shocking, right? It might not feel like it when it's shouting things like, "You'll never be good enough," or "What's wrong with you?" But beneath that harsh tone is a part of you that's just really afraid for your safety, acceptance, or sense of belonging. The inner critic's logic goes something like this. If I'm hard on you first, no one else can hurt you worse than I can. If I'm strict, you'll avoid making mistakes that could lead to embarrassment, rejection, or failure. Sound familiar? It's like having an overprotective parent in your head who's convinced that tough love is the only kind of love. How to reparent the inner critic with love, not fear. If your inner critic acts like an overbearing parent, guess what? You get to become the new parent in this story. This process is often called reparenting. Instead of responding with frustration or trying to fight it, you'll learn to respond with compassion and understanding. Here's how it works. Notice the critic's voice. Pay attention to when it's active. What's it saying? What's it afraid will happen? Acknowledge its intentions. Instead of arguing, say something like, "I see you're trying to protect me from getting hurt." It's amazing how this softens the voice. Offer reassurance. Just like you'd comfort a scared child, comfort your inner critic. "It's okay, I've got this. I'm capable of handling it." This might feel strange at first, but it's a game changer. You're not battling the critic anymore. You're showing it that you're safe, loved, and capable. And that's all it ever wanted for you in the first place. Techniques to nurture the protector. 1. Inner child reassurance. Exercise. This exercise is simple but powerful. If your inner critic's job is to protect, then it's probably reacting to fear from a much younger part of you. Think of it like this. Inside every adult is a younger version of themselves who's still carrying the weight of old fears, mistakes, and misunderstandings. Here's how to do it. Close your eyes and visualize your younger self. It might be a 5-year-old version of you or maybe a teenager. Imagine that version of you is feeling scared, unsure, or overwhelmed. Now, as the grown-up you, offer them reassurance. Tell them what they need to hear. Maybe it's, "You're safe, or "You're enough just as you are." Speak to this younger part of you with love and compassion. Why it works. Your inner critic often echoes old childhood fears. By speaking directly to that younger part of you, you're addressing the root of the issue, not just the surface-level criticism. 2. The safe space visualization. If your inner critic's job is protection, then let's give it a proper, safe space to do that job. Instead of letting it roam free in your mind 24/7, you're going to create a home base for it, a mental place where it can rest and recharge. Here's how to do it. Find a quiet spot where you can sit for a few minutes. Close your eyes and imagine a safe, cozy space. It could be a forest cabin, a sunlit room, or a quiet garden. Whatever feels safe to you. Visualize your inner critic's protector self sitting there. Imagine them relaxed, calm, and safe. Tell your protector, this is a space where you can rest. You don't have to be on high alert all the time. I'm here now, and I've got us covered. Why it works. Your inner critic's hypervigilance comes from fear. By offering it a safe, peaceful home inside your mind, you're telling it, we're safe now. It's like giving it permission to relax. 3. Gratitude for the protector. Gratitude might sound odd here. Like, why should I be grateful for the voice that's been criticizing me for years? But here's the thing. That voice is trying to protect you. It's just going about it in a clumsy, outdated way. But the intention? It's rooted in love. Here's how to do it. Write down a list of things your inner critic is trying to do for you. For example, it's trying to push me to do my best, or it's trying to protect me from embarrassment. Thank it for those intentions. You can say, thank you for trying to protect me. I know you're just looking out for me. Offer it a new role. For example, instead of criticizing me, can you be my encourager? Exercise. Write a gratitude letter to your inner protector. This exercise will shift your relationship with your inner critic in a profound way. Instead of seeing it as a bad part of you, you'll see it as a protector who's just been working overtime. Here's how to do it. Write a letter to your inner protector. Start with gratitude. For example, dear protector, I know you've been working hard to keep me safe. Thank you for always being on high alert for me. List the ways it's tried to protect you, even if it's misguided. Acknowledge its efforts. Offer it a new role. Tell it, I'd love for you to be my encourager, my supporter, and my ally. Can you help me in that way instead? What's next? Your inner critic isn't your enemy. It's a protector that's been using outdated methods to keep you safe. By nurturing this part of yourself with compassion and love, you're not only quieting its voice, you're transforming it into a powerful ally. Take your time with these exercises. Speak to your inner protector like you'd speak to a scared child or an overworked friend. Show it patience, love, and gratitude. You'll be amazed at how quickly that harsh voice softens into something much more helpful. You're doing incredible work. Keep going. Chapter 9. Quieting the inner critic in specific situations. Handling the inner critic in key life areas. The inner critic doesn't clock out at 5 p.m. It's there at work, in your relationships, and when you're trying to chase big goals. But here's the good news. It's not invincible. You're about to learn how to handle it in some of the most common and stressful areas of life. 1. Work, business. Fear of failure, imposter syndrome, and perfectionism. Work is prime real estate for the inner critic to set up shop. Thoughts like, you're not qualified for this, or what if you mess up and everyone finds out, are classic signs it's in the room. The inner critic's goal is to protect you from embarrassment, but all it's really doing is keeping you small. What to do instead? Use the, what's the worst that could happen? Practice. Ask yourself, if I do mess up, what's the absolute worst that could happen? Most of the time, the answer is something you could handle. Name it to tame it. Call it out. When you're thinking, I'm not qualified, say, oh, there's my imposter syndrome critic again. By naming it, you're separating it from you. 2. Relationships. Fear of rejection and criticism from others' relationships. Romantic, friendships, family. They're a playground for the inner critic. It's that voice that says, don't say that, they'll think you're weird, or they're mad at you, and it's your fault. The fear of rejection is real, but most of the time, it's based on old stories, not current facts. What to do instead? Talk to the critic like a friend. If your friend said, They're probably mad at me. How would you respond? Probably with something like, you're jumping to conclusions. Let's check the facts first. Use that same compassion for yourself. Check the facts. Ask, do I know they're mad at me, or am I guessing? More often than not, it's a guess. Your inner critic loves guessing games, but you're smarter than that. 3. Personal growth. Overcoming procrastination and fear of starting something new. New beginnings are scary. Your inner critic loves to swoop in right as you're about to start something fresh, a new project, a new fitness plan, or finally tackling that creative dream. It'll whisper, you'll fail, so why start? Or, who do you think you are? What to do instead? Use the future self-visualization. Close your eyes and imagine future you, 1 year after you've taken action. What's different? How do you feel? What's changed in your life? Visualization trains your brain to see success as possible. Break it down. Your inner critic thrives on overwhelm. If the goal feels too big, break it into tiny steps. Write a book becomes write 100 words today. Small steps quiet the noise. Techniques to handle the critic in these scenarios. 1. What's the worst that could happen? Practice this one, simple but so effective. The next time your inner critic is in full doom mode, ask, what's the worst thing that could actually happen here? Could I handle that? Most of the time, the worst isn't as bad as it seems. Sure, you might miss a deadline or have an awkward conversation, but you've survived worse. This technique helps you see that, even in a worst-case scenario, you'll still be okay. 2. The future self-visualization. When you're afraid to start something new, your inner critic is fixated on what could go wrong. So, flip it. Instead, imagine it going right. Here's how to do it. Picture yourself 1 year in the future, having already achieved your goal. Imagine how you feel. Confident, proud, relieved. Picture every detail of it. Ask yourself, what would this version of me want to tell present-day me? This technique gives you clarity, motivation, and a way to quiet that "what if I fail?" noise. 3. Talk to the critic like a friend. Exercise. Instead of letting your inner critic control the conversation, you're going to flip the script. Here's how it works. Write down one of the most common things your inner critic says, like, you're not good enough to do this. Imagine your friend says that about themselves. How would you respond? Write it down. Read it out loud to yourself. This is what self-compassion sounds like. This exercise shows you that you already know how to be kind, wise, and encouraging. Now it's just a matter of offering that same kindness to yourself. Exercise. Write a personalized plan for your most challenging situation. It's time to create a battle plan for your inner critic. Pick one area, work, relationships, or personal growth, where your critic's voice has been loud lately. Then, follow these steps to create a personalized action plan. 1. Identify the situation. Where does your critic's voice show up most? Is it at work? In relationships? Write down one specific situation, like, I'm afraid of asking for a raise, or I'm scared to ask someone out on a date. 2. Name the critic's message. What's it saying? Write down the exact words. Example, you're not good enough. 3. Choose a technique. Will you use the what's the worst that could happen method, the future self-visualization, or the talk to the critic like a friend approach? Write down the technique you'll use. 4. Write your reframe. What's a more helpful way to see this situation? Write it down. Example, even if I'm nervous, I'll still be proud of myself for trying. What's next? Your inner critic loves to show up in work, relationships, and personal growth because those areas matter most to you. But now, you've got tools to meet it with clarity and compassion. Remember, the goal isn't to silence the critic forever. It's to recognize its voice, meet it with understanding, and choose a more helpful way forward. You're building a stronger, kinder inner world. And that's work that's always worth doing. Chapter 10. BFF with your inner critic. Why it matters. If you've read any life-changing self-help books, you've probably noticed one thing. They each have a signature method or memorable framework that sticks with you long after you've finished reading. It's what makes the content feel actionable, clear, and repeatable. That's why this chapter introduces you to the BFF method. It's as simple Three-step process to turn your inner critic from a constant source of stress into a supportive ally. BFF stands for Befriend, Frame, Forgive. These 3 steps are like a mental toolkit you can use whenever the critic's voice gets too loud. Let's break down each step so you can start using it today. Step 1. Befriend. Name it to tame it. Your inner critic's power lies in its invisibility. Most people don't even realize it's there. They just think it's their own voice. But it's not. It's an old, familiar script running in the background. The first step to taking back control is to make the invisible visible. How to do it? Identify the critic's voice. Pay attention to the voice in your head when you're feeling down, doubting yourself, or overthinking. What is it saying? Name your critic. Give it a name like Judgy Joan, Perfect Pete, or Naggy Nancy. This makes it easier to recognize and respond to. Recognize its role. Ask, what is this critic trying to protect me from? It's usually trying to protect you from failure, embarrassment, or rejection, but it's using outdated methods to do it. Example, if you're about to start a big project and the voice says, "You're not ready for this," you can say, "Oh hey, Judgy Joan. I see you're trying to protect me from embarrassment, but I'm safe right now. Thanks for looking out for me." Why it works? When you name your critic and recognize its role, it's no longer you against your mind. It's you and your critic in conversation. This turns your mental battleground into a dialogue, which is way more productive. Step 2. Frame. Reframe the message. Reclaim your power. Once you've named and recognized your critic, it's time to flip the script. The goal here isn't to ignore the critic. It's to change how you interpret its message. This is called reframing. How to do it? Challenge the critic's thoughts. Ask, is this 100% true? Can I be absolutely sure it's true? Spoiler, it's almost never true. Reframe the critic's message. Instead of seeing the critic's message as an attack, see it as a reminder. For example, "You're going to fail" becomes, "This must be important to me if I'm feeling afraid." Create a reframe library. Write down some of your most common critical thoughts and their reframed versions. Example, "I'm not good enough" becomes, "I'm learning and growing every day." Example, let's say your critic says, "You're so behind everyone else." You could reframe it as, "I'm on my own timeline, and growth is not a race." Why it works? Reframing works because it puts you back in control of the story. When you're in control of the story, you're no longer at the mercy of the critic's negativity. Step 3. Forgive. Mistakes are proof you're trying. This is where most people get stuck. They think that being hard on themselves will make them perform better. But the truth is, self-compassion leads to growth, not shame. If you're going to make peace with your inner critic, you'll need to practice forgiveness, both for yourself and for the critic. How to do it? Forgive yourself for being human. You're not supposed to get it right all the time. Nobody does. When you make a mistake, don't pile on more criticism. Say, "I'm human, and mistakes are part of growth." Forgive your critic. Yep, you're even going to forgive your inner critic. It's been trying to protect you this whole time. It's just using bad strategies. Use a compassion break. When you're feeling overwhelmed by the critic's voice, place your hand on your chest, take a deep breath, and say, "This is hard right now. I'm doing the best I can." Example, imagine you're trying to meet a big deadline, and you miss it. Your critic says, "You're such a failure." Instead of believing it, you say, "It's okay. Missing a deadline doesn't make me a failure. I'm learning how to manage my time better." Why it works? Forgiveness softens the emotional impact of mistakes. Instead of being stuck in shame, you move forward with compassion. Self-compassion isn't letting yourself off the hook. It's the fastest way to get back on track. Why the BFF method works? It's simple. 3 clear steps. Befriend, frame, forgive. Easy to remember. It's actionable. Each step has practical tools you can use in real time. It's compassionate. Instead of fighting your critic, you're building a relationship with it. The more you use the BFF method, the quieter your inner critic's voice will become. Over time, it'll go from being your biggest bully to being a quiet, awkward friend who's trying, but not always succeeding, to help. What's next? Start using the BFF method today. Here's a quick challenge. Befriend. Name your inner critic. What's its name and personality? Frame. Write down one of your critic's harshest thoughts and reframe it into a supportive message. Forgive. Write a self-compassion statement to remind yourself that mistakes are part of growth. The more you practice, the more natural it becomes. Soon, you'll realize you're no longer at war with yourself. You're walking alongside your critic as a calm, compassionate leader. And that's where true peace begins. Befriend, frame, forgive. You've got this. Chapter 11. Your new best friend. Living with peace and power. What life feels like without a harsh inner critic. Imagine waking up in the morning and not being ambushed by a running commentary of, "You're already behind," or "You're not doing enough." Instead, you're greeted with something softer, more encouraging, like, "Today's a fresh start," or "You've got this, one step at a time." When you've befriended your inner critic, life feels lighter. You're no longer carrying the invisible weight of self-doubt everywhere you go. You're able to take action on your goals, make mistakes without spiraling into shame, and, get this, actually enjoy being you. It's not that the inner critic disappears. It's still there, but its voice changes. It's more like a cautious friend saying, "Hey, have you thought about this?" Instead of a relentless bully shouting, "You're going to fail." Big difference, right? How your self-talk changes as you befriend your inner critic. When you're in the habit of battling your inner critic, your self-talk might sound like this. "Why did you say that? You sounded so stupid. You'll never figure this out. Everyone else already knows how to do it. You're so lazy. Look at all the things you're not doing." But as you build a relationship with this part of yourself, the script changes. It's not forced, positive thinking. It's honest, compassionate self-talk. Here's what it might sound like. "That didn't come out how I'd hoped, but I'm proud of myself for speaking up. This is a learning curve, and I'm allowed to be a beginner at something new. Resting doesn't mean I'm lazy. It's part of taking care of myself." Notice the shift. It's still honest, but it's way more supportive. You're not letting your inner critic control the narrative. You're taking charge of the story. The long-term benefits of inner friendship. Once you've befriended your inner critic, life doesn't just feel better. It works better too. Here's what you'll notice over time. Resilience. Mistakes and setbacks don't crush you anymore. Instead of spiraling, you're able to say, "Okay, what's next?" Peace. Your mind isn't a battleground. Imagine the mental space you'll free up when you're not constantly defending yourself from your own thoughts. Self-trust. When your inner critic isn't constantly second-guessing you, you're free to trust your instincts. You'll notice that decision-making feels more fluid and natural. The best part, these benefits compound over time. The more you practice befriending your inner critic, the stronger your self-trust, peace, and resilience become. A 30-day practice to befriend your inner critic. All right, it's time to put everything into action. This 30-day practice will help you solidify the relationship with your inner critic. Each day, you'll take a small step that builds on the day before. The goal isn't perfection, it's consistency. Week 1, awareness and naming. Day 1 to 7. Notice every time your inner critic's voice pops up. Write down the exact words it says. Give this voice a name, like the perfectionist or Naggy Nancy. When you name it, you create distance from it. Week 2, reframing and compassion. Day 8 to 14. Every time you hear your inner critic, pause and reframe its message. Ask, "Is this 100% true?" Then offer a kinder alternative. Example, "You're so bad at this," becomes, "I'm learning," and learning takes time. Week 3, self-compassion mantras. Day 15 to 21. Create a mantra for yourself to counter your inner critic's most common attack. If it's, "You're not doing enough," your mantra could be, "I'm doing the best I can, and that's enough." Repeat it when you're feeling self-doubt. Week 4, gratitude and integration. Day 22 to 30. Practice gratitude for your inner critic each day. Thank it for trying to protect you, even if it's clumsy about it. Write down 3 moments where you handled your self-talk with compassion. Celebrate your progress. By the end of 30 days, you'll notice a shift. The voice of your inner critic won't have the same power over you. It'll be quieter, gentler, and, most importantly, a little more like a friend. Final words of encouragement. If you've made it this far, you've already done something incredible. You've decided to change your relationship with one of the most persistent parts of your mind. That's not easy work, but it's so worth it. Here's something to remember. Progress, not perfection. There will be days when your inner critic's voice is louder than you'd like. That's okay. It's not a sign you're failing. It's a sign you're human. Lastly, your inner critic isn't something to defeat or silence forever. It's a part of you, and just like every part of you, it's worthy of love and compassion. The more you show up for it with understanding, the more it'll show up for you in a way that's helpful, not hurtful. You're doing amazing work. Keep going. Your best friend, aka you, is cheering you on.